Hello and welcome to Feeder Fishing with me, Steve Ringer. Right, I've brought you here today to Barston Lakes. The weather's been atrocious of late. It doesn't look cold today because it isn't, it's warmed up. This is the first day. I rang Nigel, the fishery owner, yesterday because we were hoping to film it and it was frozen solid. There's still ice right in the early numbers, so I'm expecting it to be hard, but the great thing about Barston is there's loads of skimmers, and it's the skimmers we're going to be going for today. We're going to ignore the carp. Could have sat on good pegs and maybe tried to catch 2 or 3 carp, but for me in the winter it's all about bites. So we're going to target the skimmers. We're on a good peg, in peg 52, and I'd expect sort of 10 or 12 fish today. The interesting part though is perhaps the bait. Now, I fished a match here recently and bloodworm and joker was allowed. I bought bloodworm and joker with me purely for the reason I know it'll get me bites, and I've bought it here again today. So I'm going to run you through, I'm going to use some traditional baits like worms and maggots, etc. But I'm also going to talk to you about how I use bloodworm and joker in the feeder. So let's move on and I'll talk to you about the bait. Okay, first things first, before we move on to the bloodworm and joker and the other baits, I'm just going to talk you through ground bait. Now, mix-wise, I've got sort of what I call 2 mixes. So I've got a 50-50 mix, G5 Ringers Natural. So it's a sweet fish meal. It's just got like that creamy sort of smell, which I really like. And I think a bit of sweet this time of year doesn't do any harm for skimmers. What I've done as well, I just grabbed that. Once I mixed it the night before. I want it pretty sort of inert, pretty dead. So just pushed it through a pinky riddle, so it's nice and fine, minimal food content. And now on the subject of food content, I've also got some black damp lean. So it's Terre de Soie Noir, just to take the edge off the colour, but at the same time, I don't want to put any extra food in the mix. You know what I mean? They always say bream love lean. So all I've done, I've took a pint and a half of, basically I've got a pint and a half of G5, a pint and a half of Ringers Natural, and then I've got a pint and a half of black lean. So you can just see there, nice and fine, been pushed through the pinky riddle, and I've just wet it up again as well. So I've atomised it, get it nice and damp, so it just forms a ball like so. And it's been pushed through a pinky riddle, so it's nice and fine. And all I'm going to do, I've got that ground bait nice and wet, as you can see. I'm just going to add the lean to it. It's much easier to add the lean, like once it's wetted up and once your ground bait. It's very difficult to mix like dry lean, dry ground bait all at the same time. So I've mixed the ground bait separately, wetted the lean up separately, then I've just literally dropped it in like so, got my drill. And now I've got a really fine dark mix. Low in food, but still plenty of attraction. I've got the sweet fish meal, the Ringers Natural, and the G5 for the attraction, and then the lean, nice and fine, a bit of cloud. The water's, it's a bit more coloured than when I come the other day for the match, but it's still clear by Barston standards, and them skimmers can be very spooky. So for me, a dark mix isn't going to do any harm. So nice and dark, nice and fine. Consistency wise, I wouldn't say it's over wet. It's difficult to over wet a mix with lean because it can become quite claggy. Just a nice, what I'd call normal consistency, nice squeeze, just forms a ball, but at the same time breaks up. But I will stress it's very important to put it through that pinky riddle. Make sure you take any lumps, any food content out. You know what I mean? I'm not looking for loads of bites. So I don't want to be filling the fish up with ground bait. So moving on, we've got our natural baits. Got some dead pink, got a quarter of dead pinkies. Not a lot red. I just think red's a great colour. As I'm going to be feeding a bit of joker, fishing bloodworm, etc. Red's a good colour, it matches that. So some quarter of a pint of dead pinkies. Quarter of dead red maggots as well. You know, I mean, just these are hook baits more than anything. I will feed an odd one, but basically they're just going to be hook baits. So there's a worm escaped into there. Then I wouldn't go bream or skimmer fishing without a few worms. Even when the water's been clear just lately on here, I have found they wanted a little bit of choppy, so I'm going to feed a bit of choppy on one line and probably not the other, but I'll talk to you about that in session rather than going through it now. But I'd always want, I literally got 1/4 kilo I had with me, just worms that I've had knocking around, and I will chop a few and I will put them in because I do think they make a difference on here. Then we're moving on to the bait that perhaps causes the most controversy, bloodworm and joker. Now, a lot of people think it's a really complicated bait to fish with, it's really expensive. And for me, it really isn't. It's a simple bait to fish with. And when you break it down, I've picked up a match pack this week off Sam Wildsmith, lovely fresh bait. And for 15 quid, I get 1/2 kilo of joker and a good pinch of bloodworm for the hook. Now, 1/2 kilo will do me, this time of year, 3 matches. So basically, you're looking at £5 a match, that's all. And it's not a lot of money. I haven't got a lot of other bait either. And it is a really simple bait to fish. Looking after it wise, pick it up, comes in the paper nice and damp. Just keep it in the paper, in the fridge, set your fridge sort of 3 to 4 degrees overnight. And as long as the paper's kept damp, the joker's pretty much bulletproof, so to speak. Then with the bloodworm, ideally pick it up the day before. But if you're not, all I've been doing, because I had to pick mine up a couple of days ago, put it in a nice shallow tray, cover it with an inch, maybe an inch of water, and then every day, just let it go through it, put it on a riddle, just let it go through, take the dead off. As long as you take the dead off, the good stuff will stay alive. So for fishing, I just like to keep it in a little bit of water like so. As you can see there, nice and fresh, lovely red colour. And it's a bait at this time of year that bream and skimmers find absolutely irresistible. Okay, as far as the fishing goes, when it comes to the bloodworm and joker, I want 2 mixes. I want one for like what I call fishing and then one for feeding. So for let's do the fishing mix first. I like to measure everything. So I've got a pint tub here, and I'm going to be measuring the bloodworm and joker with a little 150ml pot. The reason I like to measure everything, it gives me a future reference. So like, say I fish a match here, I know exactly what I fed, rather than sort of going, oh, handful of this, handful of that, mixing it all together, and then at the end thinking, I've only got a rough idea what I fed. This way, by measuring it, I know exactly how much ground bait I fed in relation to joker. So for the actual fishing side of things, I'm going to take 2 pints of ground bait, and then literally using the pot to measure it. Not going to use a lot of joker at all, so 1/2 a pot. You can just see that in there. So you're looking at 75ml of joker. So it's not a lot of joker at all. I can increase it obviously if I want to. But one of the myths about bloodworm and joker is that you have to pile it in, and you really don't need to put a lot in. So I'm going to drop that in like so. I don't need to lean it before I put it in. Just put it in. Give it a good mix round. Like so. Just with my hand, I don't want to drill it because obviously that's going to kill the joker and smash it up. So if you can just see there, you can see the joker in the mix. There's not loads, but there's plenty of attraction there. The thing with joker is it's got a really distinctive smell that I think skimmers and bream love. Like I can smell it through the mix already. So I'm going to start off putting that in. Of course, if things don't go quite to plan or there's more fish there than I expect, I can always put a little bit more in the mix. But to start with, 2 pints of ground bait, 75ml of joker. If I just tip that into there, that's my fishing mix. There's a little bit left in the bucket. Then I need a baiting up mix. My idea today is I'm going to have 2 lines. I'm going to have a longish line. I haven't plumbed it up yet to find where I'm going to fish it exactly, but around 30 metres, which is going to be my main fishing line. And I'm going to put some bait in short, say maybe 20 metres. I'll talk to you about why the distance is, because I've got a few things that went on in the match that maybe didn't quite go quite right. So I want to talk about how I'm going to do it slightly different today to see if it makes a difference. So for my baiting mix, my idea is I'm going to put some bait in on a shorter line, and I'm not going to go on it for maybe 2.5 hours. So I'm going to make this mix a little bit richer. So I'm going to go with 2 pints of bait again, just because it makes it easy, measuring wise. So I've got my 2 pints of ground bait again in my bucket, and I want a richer mix, because I'm not going to go on it for quite some time. The other week I used the same mix, as in like same ratio, 2 pints of ground bait to 75ml of joker, but I didn't catch anything on my short line. Now there's 2 reasons I think for this. Maybe I put it too short, but maybe there just wasn't enough bait there to give me a chance of holding a few fish. So I'm going to put 150ml of joker into 2 pints, which is quite a rich mix, but bear in mind there's not a lot else in there. I might put an odd pinky in there, etc. Still not masses of food content and not a lot of bait, so you probably won't even see. You should be able to see a difference. obviously in my right hand I've got my fishing mix, and in my left I've got my baiting mix. You can see the baiting mix is a lot richer, but my thinking is I'm probably going to put 5 or 6 feeders on my short line, and I'm not going to fish it for 2.5 hours. So I need some bait there to try and hold them skimmers in the pegs, so that when I do drop on it, they've got their heads down and they've got confident, and I'm going to be able to catch them. So that's the theory. Let me just talk to you about obviously the distances, where I'm going to fish and why. Okay, then the next step is to work out where I'm going to fish. Now, previous experience of fishing for skimmers here at Barston tells me around 30 metres, and anything from maybe 15 to 20 is going to be the sort of 2 lines I'm going to fish. Now, a lot of people will tell you you've got to find gravel at Barston. So even for skimmers or carp, you find gravel and you fish on the gravel. Now, I will always have a look. So like, I've clipped this up at 30 metres, got a marker on the far bank, and I'll always have a look just to see what I'm fishing over. But if I can't find gravel, to me it's really not the end of the world. That's a little bit soft at 30 metres. I think for skimmers, personally, that's not a bad thing. I'm now probably at 26, and the tips, there's some proper gravel at 26, but I'm quite happy fishing at 30. It's probably just off the back of the gravel, and it's not soft, so everything's plug-in, but it's a little bit softer than where I am now, for instance. There's some proper sharp stone. One thing I will say, if you're going to look to see what's on the bottom, you really need braid on your reel. I've got 010 Tournament Evo and a short shock leader, a 10-pound ST. And the way I can tell the gravel is the tip's just bouncing, rather than sort of sitting and plugging or really a sort of soft pull. It's bouncing as though there's some quite sharpish stones on the bottom. Just going to have one more chub, just to be sure. So that's clipped up at 30 metres. There is a bit of gravel there, but it's definitely not as pronounced as what it is now, say at 28. But I'm quite happy to fish at 30, purely for the reason I want to fish my 2 lines a reasonable distance apart. And one thing I didn't mention, obviously lead size for plumbing up. If you're going to plumb up and try and feel some gravel, then you don't want to be doing it with a 1/2 ounce lead. I've got an 1.5 ounce Guru square pair, and just look at that lead. That was a brand new lead, and you can tell by the gravel now, the paint's already the lead's damaged basically. The paint's already been sort of stripped off. That's just because of how sharp that gravel is on the bottom. So that's the first rod at 30 metres. Just drop that one down there. The second rod, I think, is that one. Now, when I came the other day, I fished 17 metres on my short line. I didn't catch anything, as I've already mentioned. And I've got a feeling with the water being a bit clear and a bit cold, it was too short. So today, I've clipped up at 20 metres for the shorter line. So I'm just going to, again, just have a look, just to see what the bottom's like. You might notice, well, I've picked 2 separate markers. That's just gravel there. Quite sharp gravel. But I've picked 2 separate markers. My idea being, I've got a marker over there where the blue car is now. There's quite a decent sized tree. And then there's a little bush, sort of, where there's an angler, then a little bush, and that's going to be my short line. So I've got them at sort of angles like that. What I don't want is, the idea is I'm going to put a reasonable volume of bait on the shorter line and then just fish the longer line. But I don't want to be like spooking fish on that shorter line. So rather than putting them dead in the line, I'm just going to angle them slightly. So the short line's maybe at 11 o'clock, and then the long line's probably at an angle of sort of 1:30, 2 o'clock. That way I can fish the long line, but my line's not running through the short line. Some people like to fish the 2 in the line, so obviously you can see when fish moving on the short line because you get liners and indications. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. Yes, liners and indications are great because you know there's fish there, but equally, every time they hit the line, there's potential for them to spook. I'd rather fish it slightly to the side, my shorter line, put the bait in, let the fish settle, and they're going to be that little bit more confident when it comes to fishing for them. So we've got 2 lines, 20 metres and 30 metres. As I said, the 20 metre line's definitely on gravel. The 30 metre line, it's on a bit of gravel, but not as pronounced. But like I said, it really isn't as important as some people will tell you on here that you have to fish on gravel. If anything, you could argue skimmers will prefer to feed on a softer bottom. That's just the way they are. But that's that. I'm just going to clip all my rods up. Basically what I've got is I've got 3 11-foot tournaments, nice soft action rod with an ounce tip in, perfect for skimmers. As I said, I've got 010 tournament Evo braid, short shot leader, a 10-pound ST. Then I've got my normal little links. You can just see them there, running on the line, down to the little stop, and just a twizzled loop with another loop in the end for attaching my hook length. Nice and simple, but really effective. Right, I've clipped all 4 rods up at relevant distances. Something I've done that I haven't mentioned is, on the short line I'm going to put my bait, on the long line I'm just going to chuck out and fish. I'm literally going to put nothing in at the start, chuck out and fish, and just see what happens. That's sort of my way of feeling my way into the session. On the baiting line, I've clipped my fishing rod up at 20 metres and my baiting rod up at 19 metres. The idea being, sometimes the fish don't want to settle over a lot of bait, so I'm going to bait up at 19, fish at 20. Sometimes they'll just sit off the bat, particularly those bigger bream. But if they do come onto the bait, by fishing at 20, I'm still going to get indications, so I can always take a metre off and come back onto the bait. But a little trick that I use a lot when fishing with Blue Woman Joker and Leam, etc., is to put a lot of bait in at a distance and then just fish just off the back of it. And then sometimes you catch off the back of it, but sometimes you catch on it. But that way I've got the best of both worlds. So as for baiting up itself, I'm using the Guru baiting up feeders. It's the large version. What you might notice is though, I've took the lead off. There's your lead. It's only shallow here, probably, don't know, 4 to 5 foot. So I've took the lead off. You know, I just think it makes it easier. There's plenty of weight as I fill the feeder now to bait. There's loads of weight. Leam's quite heavy anyway. Mix is quite heavy. Plenty of weight there. I don't need the weight on there. It's still going to get down really quick. I just think as well, without the weight in shallow water, I get a little bit of a better spread. So I'm just covering a bigger area. So that's the idea why I haven't got the lead on. Just tighten up that clutch before we chuck. I'm not trying to bait on a 6-pence either. So I'm going to let it hit the bottom. It's already hit the bottom. That tells you how shallow it is. Just going to wait, because I want it to be right, the baiting. So rather than sort of emptying it instantly as maybe I would in summer, just give it a couple of seconds to let the water absorb it. A couple of flicks of the rod top, baits out. And beauty of these feeders as well, because they're plastic, they come to the top dead quick. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to put 6 in. No, well 7. 7's a lucky number, so we'll go with 7. I'm going to put 7 in, but as I said, I don't intend on looking on them for at least 2 hours. This is a sort of line, it's a throwaway line to a degree, but if it goes, it's where I could catch a lot of fish in a very short space of time. That's 2. At the moment, I'm just literally putting that mix in that I showed you, which is just Joker, the ground bait and the lean, nothing else. Not plugging the baiting up feeder too hard as well. As I said, it's very shallow. I don't mind it clouding up a little bit. And when I think cloud, even the water's, it's not as clear as it has been, but it's clear enough where a little bit of cloud won't hurt. That's 3. Just going to put, just literally pinch of pinkies in the mix and a pinch again of dead maggots, just so there's something else on the bottom other than Joker, but not a lot of it. Like literally most of that has just gone in this next feeder. That's 4. I'm not going to put any worms in either at the moment. I'm going to put a little bit of worm in on that long line, because as I said, I did think they wanted it the other day. I'm not putting in on any on this line to start with. If it comes to it, I'll put it in when I start fishing it. Number 5. And what I'm really trying to do with this line is sort of replicate what you do on the pole. Often when you're fishing with pole fishing with Blue Woman Joker, you put a quantity of bait in, a lot more than this to be fair, and then you leave it alone and you'll catch late on it because the fish have settled on it. And I'm basically trying to replicate that with a feeder. And it's a method that's caught me a lot of fish in the past at Barston. But what I did feel the other day was got it too short, and I think I put a much weaker mix, shall we say, so nowhere near as much bait in it last time. Maybe I just didn't hold any fish. I did have a couple of indications on that line, but it never produced a bite, and I felt like it should have done. And I think I weighed in just under 20 pound and 24 framed, and I never caught a fish off my short line, and I felt like I should have done. And if I'd have had one little spell on that, that would have been, I'd have framed off a peg that wasn't on paper the greatest skimmer peg. Right, one more, and then we're on to some fishing. Now, I've not used, like, I've put 7 in, but I've still probably got 3/4 of a pint of mix left. So I've only fed like 1.25 pints of the ground bait lean mix. So if I do need to top it up, I can do. It's not a line that I'd normally expect to top up, but you never know, and there is some mix there. And if I want to swap and change, say on that longer line, I want to put a bit more joker through, I can have a couple of chucks with a richer mix, just to try and put a bit more traction in the water. So that's that. Now, I'm going to hopefully leave that line alone. Another airplane coming in a minute, I think. Going to leave that line alone for at least 2 hours. What time is it? 20 past 10. So I wouldn't expect to go on that line before 20 past 12 at the very earliest. So right, the longer line, I'm going to start off on quite a short hook length. The other day I started on a 50. One thing that is noticeable here is when the skimmers come into your peg, you get a lot of indication, particularly with braid, because obviously you're getting your indications magnified. Got a lot of little taps and knocks, and you know they're there. When I switched down to a 30 centimetre hook length, it was a lot better. So I'm going to start on a 30 centimetre hook length. Got 014 pure fluorocarbon. I'm quite liking fluorocarbon for feeder fishing at the minute, for the reason it's stiff, sinks well, and there's nothing not to really like about it. The fact it's stiff as well helps to try and minimise tangles. Hook then, bear in mind we're at Barston today, is a size 14 Guru F1 pellet. Seems quite a big hook, but I'm fishing quite big hook baits. I'm going to start on a single dead maggot and then a bunch of bloodworm. So maybe 5 or 6 bloodworm, and once I've got these on, you'll see what I mean about the hook bait size. The other thing with the F1 pellet, they're a very sharp hook. Now, just in case, obviously, there's people watching who've never used bloodworm, when it comes to hooking it, basically you go through what I call the green head. Dead simple. When you look at a bloodworm, it's got a very prominent head. Just go through the green head, and with an F1 pellet, you can literally just nick it on, purely for the fact that it's such a sharp hook. There you go. I've got 5 or 6 bloodworm on, and a maggot like so. Nice big bait. Nice and visible, so if I do get some skimmers feeding in the swim, they're going to see it nice and quick. Before I fill the feeder, let me just talk to you about the feeder itself. 4-hole original Drennan cage, brilliant little feeder. All I've done to it is I've added a little bit of extra lead, purely to make it cast a bit easier. I mean, I've put the lead at the bottom so it's nice and weight forward. It's just going to cut through any wind. I'm going to start on the 4-hole, and then what I'll probably do is just drop down to the 3-hole. So I'm going to have 2 5 to 6 minute casts on the 4-hole. And then, depending on what response I get, just drop it down to the 3-hole. As for what I'm going to put in the feeder, I've got my 75mm mixer joker. I'm going to put a pinch of choppy, like so, just a little blob. You can just see that there. Couple of dead pinkies, literally 2 dead maggots, and not a lot of bait at all. Little trick I like to do with bloodworm as well, because it can sort of wriggle about a bit. Just like to dip it before I chuck. So I'll just drop it in the water like so, just to straighten it out, make sure it's sitting nice and straight. There we go. Bang on. Now it's just a case. Got my trusty stopwatch. You know, I just personally think you fish so much more efficiently with a stopwatch. Start the watch. As I said, I'm going to fish 2 6-minute chucks. I don't expect to bite in the first half hour, but you never know. I've got the lake to myself, so even though it's freezing cold, I might be able to pull a few fish. So we'll see, but 2 6-minute chucks to start, and then we'll take things from there. Well, things have gone pretty much dead to plan. I had 2 6 to 7 minute chucks on the 4-hole. not a sign. But put a little bit of bait down, just chuck the 3-hole, and it's been out just over 10 minutes, and it's gone round. So it's almost like I put a little bit of bait down with the two chucks on the floor, shut the 3-hole to catch the fish. It's not a big fish, probably a pound plus. Just coming into netting range now. There we go. Oh, quite a lively one. But they all count when it's this cold. Probably a typical stamp the skimmers have been of late here. Do get a few 3-pounders in amongst them. There's a lot of pound fish, and they're the ones that produce the bites. Really nice fish, typical sort of bloodworm and joker fish really. Probably a pound, pound 4, and it feels like a block of ice. So I'm going to drop him in the net, see if we can repeat it. On the hook, still single dead maggot. I'm not a massive fan of chopping and changing hook baits. If I start to get indications and I'm not getting bites, then maybe I'll mix it up a bit more. But single dead red and a nice bunch of bloodworm. I try and pick out the bigger ones, to be honest. Just nicking them through the head. 4, 5, 6, and around that sort of area, nice good number. Then in the feeder, bearing in mind I'm down to the little 3-hole now, little tiny pinch of choppy, a couple of pinkies, and obviously you're going to get a bit of joker out the mix anyway. So your little tiny feeder, 2 straps of lead on that one, again just to help with casting. A very light feeder with no lead on it, and you struggle to cast it 30 metres, put a couple of strips on and it'll cast there dead easy. So just dip the feeder, straightens the worms out nicely, especially with the water temperature being so low. The other big plus with like the 3-hole, it's really calm today, and as I said, the water's cold. It's a little bit clear, just a little bit less disturbance. You know what I mean? There's nothing worse than having a few fish feeding in the swim and chucking a great big feeder on them. So a little 3-hole, feather it in, goes in with barely a splash, and you're not going to be spooking fish quite so easy. And even though it's a tiny little feeder at this time of year, it still holds quite a bit of bait, particularly where joker's concerned, which has got a lot of pull-in power. You might notice as well, and this is a question I get asked a lot, I don't really bother sinking the braid. Basically, I sort of let it sink itself. If the tip gets pulled round a long way as it is now, all I'll do is just mend it. I'm not one of these who likes to put the rod under the water, tighten up and give it a couple of whooshes to try and sink the braid or the line. I'd much rather let it sort of sink itself naturally. As long as the feeder's not moving, which it's not, I can literally just pick the rod up, mend the braid, and it's virtually sank now anyway. So it's just something I do, and a lot of people say to me, oh, I don't see you sinking the line or sinking the braid. The reason you don't see me is because I don't do it. I'll literally mend it, just stop the feeder moving or being pulled out of position, and just tighten up as I go along. I mean, time-wise now, I'm thinking there's a little bit of bait out there, and I've caught a fish. 12-minute chucks, and we'll take things from there. As I said, we've been going just over 30 minutes. No, just under 30 minutes now. So on the 2-hour mark, depending on what's happening on this long line, we'll have a drop short. Had a skimmer, next chuck in, dead on 10 minutes. It went round and basically I pulled out instantly, which is never great. Next chuck in, I had 2 or 3 indications, but nothing to pick up on, and the bloodworm was just ragged. And this chuck, I've had 1 indication that I've seen, another little skimmer, and no bite. Gone to pick up on 15 minutes, and there's 1 on the end. So, you know, there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one, and then probably the main one, is the fact the water temperature is absolutely freezing, so they're not moving around much. Probably 14 ounces, a bit smaller than the last one. But what I might do is, if it keeps happening, just shorten the hook length up a bit. I'm on 30 centimetres now, and I might just shorten it down to 20. Because if I'm getting ragged and not seeing the bites, obviously that's not ideal. But I'm going to have 1 more chuck on 30, see what happens. But it's very noticeable there's no quick bites to be had. I'm hoping maybe as the session progresses, I'll get a few quicker bites. But at the minute, it's like pretty much 10 minutes plus to get a bite. But like, as I said, that one was hanging on the end, so makes you wonder how long it's been on there. But I had 1 indication after about 6-7 minutes, which I'm pretty sure was a line bite. But we'll keep plugging away. As I said, I'm quite hopeful as well that that short line's going to be really good when I go on it. I do feel as though maybe I'm a couple of bites away. Like, we've been going just over an hour now, so I'm a couple of bites away from where I should be. But I think part of that's down to that lost fish right in the middle of the swim. So I'm pretty confident that this chuck, it's going to go maybe a little bit quicker, because I'm feeling we're getting to that time of day now where the fish should start to have a chew. The last couple of chucks, like I've had 2 fish, the last couple of chucks I've just had indications and no bites. And it's, don't know, it's a bit puzzling, because I didn't get this the other day in the match, and I'm same ratio of mix, not like there's loads of bait there, but little pulls and knocks. You know, I just had a little pull then where I just thought maybe that's on, and it's a decent fish. I just think the water's so cold, those fish just aren't moving about much. Normally, like, they're proper pulls on, particularly on braid, but today they're like tiny little movement. That's a tiny little movement on the tip, and like it's a sort of pound fish. I mean, nice stamp. I feel as though I should be catching a few more, but I will say I'm quite hopeful that the short line could be really good. I just feel as though there is some fish here. I'm getting enough indications, and where I put a bit more bait, I could have a really good run. It'd be nice to sort of get some quicker bites. Like, that was 6 minutes, so yeah, it was a bit quicker. But I just feel as though I should be catching a lot faster. I'm going to try and maybe putting a bigger bunch on, see if they'll home in on it a little bit quicker. Instead of sort of 4, put sort of 7 or 8 on. So it's a nice big visible bait on the bottom. I mean, you've got to remember as well, the water temperature is going to be ridiculously low. Still ice in the far corner, and obviously the ice that was on here yesterday is going to have melted. So what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to cut out the worm, the choppy, just put the joker through for a minute, a couple of chucks just to see. Maybe I'm giving them a little bit too much choice. So I've got a duck in the way now, so I can't actually chuck. It was actually slightly left of where I've been fishing, but I don't think it hurts. It's not like I'm putting a lot of bait in. I have seen a couple of fish roll short as well, which again is giving me more enthusiasm for that short line. We've got probably another 15 minutes and I shall have a look there, and hopefully it'll be a start of a nice run of fish. Been getting the last couple of loads of like silly little indications. I haven't been able to get it to go round. I still haven't tried shortening the hook length. But what I've tried is just blobbing it. I've just got my joker back out. Instead of cut the worm out altogether, and I'm just putting a blob of joker in the middle of the feeder. And I've still had indications, and it's just gone round again. I think it's an F1. It's definitely not a skimmer. Let's have a look. It's fighting far too hard, unless it's foul hooked. It's fighting far too hard. It was, because I'm on braid, it was what you call a proper bite. I'm thinking it's either a little carp or an F1. It makes you start to wonder what the little indications are. It's not a big fish, but I'm having to be careful just purely for the fact that I am on braid. My money's on F1. Or foul hooked. That could be an option. Could be foul hooked. Could be a foul hooked F1. It's just not nodding its head much unless it's wrapped up in the line. I think it's, I don't know, is the honest answer. I want to see it now, whatever happens. It just won't come up. It's not far under the surface, which is starting to make me think it's fouled. Surely a foul at skimmer. I know it's an F1 in the mouth. I was right. Just shows everything eats bloodworm. There we go. Nice fish. Lovely fish. Proper F1 that one. Hook's just threaded through, which is always annoying. There you go, probably chunky. Probably getting on for £4. Really nice fish. Let's see if we can get another one of them. As I said, I'm just blobbing. Well, just the last couple of chucks. Cut the worm out, cut any pinkies out. So literally in the feeder, if I just show you, just putting a blob of joker like that. So just a blob in the middle. The idea sort of being, if you imagine a blob of joker on, if the fish sort of get used to picking up a blob, it looks very much like a bunch of bloodworm. So I can sort of mimic it with my hook bait a lot more effectively. So if you imagine a bunch of bloodworm, like 6, 7, 8 bloodworm on the bottom, looks just like a blob of joker. So I'm hoping that this way I'll get less indications, maybe, but more proper bites. Because at the end of the day, you can't weigh indications in, and I've had plenty today, which is odd because, like I said, I didn't get many the other day. Today, lots of indications and not many bites, but it could be the fact there's some F1s out there just milling around. So blob of jokers in the middle, you can sort of make it out there, just in the middle of the feeder. See if we can repeat the trick. Well, it looks like the blobbing could be a time of day thing, but the blobbing might be working. I've had that F1, gone back out, 6 minutes, and got another skimmer. No indications before it either. Not the greatest of bites again, but easy enough to see. I wouldn't want to be fishing no mono straight through because I think you struggle to see them. But it could just be that the little blob is a better way of doing it today. Another pound. Bit of a tangle, but another pound fish. No sign of the big ones, but I think that just sort of shows how cold the water is. Just shows you can still get a bite even when you're in a tangle, as I seem to be. Free running rig is no, that's it. No longer free running. But I want to come short now. We're at the 2 hour mark, just past the 2 hour mark. What have I had, like 4 skimmers and an F1, and I'm itching to look short, but because I feel as though maybe I've stumbled on something with the blob in, I'm just going to have a couple more chucks out just to see. The only thing I'd like is a few of them sort of 3-pounders, 2 or 3 of them. I'd just put the icing on the cake. So just a blob. Nice little blob of joker. Right in the middle of the feet. Just dip it to straighten them bloodworm out. I reckon this will go as well, but we'll start the watch and see. Well, it could be time of day, but since I've started blobbing, I'm 4 in 4 now, and the bite time's like the last 2 minutes, which is like far quicker. I mean, we are at the best time of day, so it could be coincidence, but there's no doubt that blobbing it isn't doing any harm. It's hard to fathom why it'd be so right. The only other thing, obviously, that I've done, cut out the worms. So although I thought worms were really good the other day, they don't seem anywhere near as sort of to give me any pulling power today. Just like fishing for bloodworm and a pinky now, but definitely the bloodworm they're coming for. Maybe they just wanted a bit more joker than what I've been putting in. The problem I've got now is catching really well on the long line. When do I look at the short line? I think I'm going, as it's not a match, I'm going to have a look anyway in a minute, just because it'll give me a good idea for the match I'm on Saturday, whether how I've baited up that short line is right or wrong. I don't want to leave it too long, because if there has been a lot of feeding fish over it, although I put what I thought was a lot of bait in, if there's a decent head of skimmers come over the top of it, they will have cleared it out. Let's get the blobber joker. Bit of a bigger blob that time. Bigger blob might mean bigger fish, you never know. Start the watch again. Fingers crossed for another 2-minute bite. Okay, I had 4 in 4 and just waited a bit longer then, and on 7 minutes caught a roach, 6-ounce roach. I've got a feeling now them funny bites I was getting earlier that are ragging the bait, they're much sharper than the skimmer bites, and I think they were roach. So what I'm going to do, I'm itching to have a look short anyway. Just going to put a blobber joker like so into the baiting up mix. I'm going to put one big un out on the 30-metre line just to set it up in case I drop short now and I don't get a bite. So I'm going to put one big un out at 30 metres without taking out the seagull, just to set it up. You know, I mean, there is some fish out there. There's some roach. I've had a roach. I've had them skimmers and F1. So I've just put one feeder in now. We're baiting up the large one, just giving it a few seconds to empty, just so when I drop short, it doesn't happen. I've got somewhere back to go. I can drop back in there and expect maybe another run of fish. It's all about trying to think one step ahead. So yeah, I'm hoping now I'm going to drop short and spend the rest of the day fishing 20 metres, but there's probably just as much chance I'm going to drop short and it's not going to move, so I'll need to go back again. And if that's the case, by putting that feeder in, at least I'm setting it up and putting a bit of bait to try and hold a few fish while I'm not fishing it. That's the theory, but it all depends on what happens when I cast this out. In my head I'm thinking this is going to be solid, but I did think the other day it'd be good and I never had a bite on it. But let's see, I'm going to try the blob on the short line. I'm not going to feed any worms because I didn't feed any there to start with either. Let's have a look. Hopefully, if there's a few fish there, it won't take long. Like I said, I've seen, not for probably an hour or so now, but 2 or 3 fish did roll short. And they look bigger fish than what I've caught out there as well. So let's see what happens. Ideally, in the next couple of minutes, you'll see me playing a bream. Two minutes 49 seconds. I had a line of dead on a minute, like a real slow pull, then a little flicker after 2 minutes, then at 2.5 minutes, round it's gone. So I'm hoping I've got it about right. Them 7 big feeders at the start, and now I'm fishing that metre past it as well, remember, that I'm going to have a really good finish. Again, it's not a massive, not a bad one, pound plus again, maybe £1.5. There we go. Yeah, £1.5. Well, the short line's been a little bit frustrating because I had 4 really quick, like pound plus fish, nice fish. Then I just had a chuck with nothing, and now I've just put a big bunch of bloodworm on, took the maggot off, and I've got another fish. But there's not. I thought when I first dropped on it, I was going to empty it short. there's not loads and loads of indications there to make me think, oh, it's absolutely solid. Surprised as well I've not picked up a bigger fish short, like a 3-pounder. I can only think the water's that cold that them bigger fish aren't really having a go. And these are still like pound, pound and a half plus, so lovely fishing and proper bites. The short hook length as well doesn't seem to have done any harm. Shortened it down to a 20. I think I've had 5 fish on it now. I'm just surprised there's not more fish short, considering I have caught there now. And part of me wonders whether actually maybe 7 feeders at the start wasn't enough. I reckon I could have put 10 in perhaps. And also on that longer line, could have perhaps been a little bit more aggressive. But it's hard to sort of be 100% certain, because it could just be time of day now. There's a few fish feeding. I'm just surprised, although like I said, I've had 5 fish in probably half an hour short. I'm surprised it's not even more solid. I'm surprised there's not liners and all sorts. Definitely seems like when I blob the Joker, for whatever reason, I'm getting less liners. Maybe spreading it all over it. Obviously when you're mixing it into the mix, it's spread out too much. Also, the advantage of blobbing it is if it comes out and sits on the bottom like a blob, it looks just like a ball of bloodworm. So if you imagine, obviously there's a blob of Joker like that sat on the bottom, and then if I fish a bunch of bloodworm, obviously not that many, but maybe that many, the two look quite similar to, oh yeah, that was a quick bite. I'm presuming this might be in the F1, judging by I nearly lost the rod. It could be a bream, it's just nodding. That's the quickest bite I never even started the watch. To be honest, it feels more like a bream now. Just shows you must watch your rod at all times. If it's a bream, it's a proper one. It's one of those ones that's been missing all day. It's a proper bite though. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's a proper one. Well, 3-pounder it looks like. That's even better as well. Like the last 2 fish, big bunch of bloodworm, take the maggot off altogether and just fish with a bloodworm up. They're the ones that quite often you get on these pegs. Like 3-pound plus fish. Really nice. 3 or 4 of them and I'll be very happy. It's just got better and better. I think I've like probably had, I don't know, 10-12 fish off the short line now in like 40-45 minutes. And the bite time's getting shorter and shorter. You're like minute and a half. Definitely seems, might just be me, but a bunch of bloodworm, like 8 to 10 bloodworm on the hook is far better than putting a bloodworm and 4 maggots on. Just seems to stand out better. You're getting quicker bites. And also blobbing it just seems, I'm getting less indications when I blob it, but more proper bites, almost like I'm spreading the fish out a bit too much when I'm not blobbing it. As in when you blob it, you're concentrating them more around the feeder. And of course, concentrating around the feeder works better with the short. I've still got the 20cm hook length on. And if they're feeding round the feeder on the Joker, obviously it makes sense to get your hook bait as close to the feeder as possible. But it's weird because I was getting, on that long line, I had lots of little indications. Then when I blobbed it, the indication stopped and I caught. And I blobbed it from the start on the short line. And I've had very few like line bites. It's just basically either gone off the rest or tap, tap, tap. And it's fish on. like I say, bite time's a lot quicker. Yeah, we're at the best time of day now, but the fishing's really good, and if it carries on, I'd expect to finish with like maybe £30 plus, which, when you consider, I think there's still ice on that far corner and the water temperature must be really low, shows you how good Bloodworm and Joker can be on a cold day. I think it's safe to say the swim is now what is known as solid. I reckon I've had over 20 fish off this short line in, what time is it? Don't know, in an hour and a half. Bite time's literally like 1.5 minutes. Not massive fish, but they're all pound plus. I've had that one proper one, like £3. But it's just the regularity of the bites that's amazing. Makes me think a little bit like maybe I didn't attack that long line enough. I was very negative on it. But that's the beauty of fishing how I fished. It's like a negative and positive. If they hadn't wanted any bait, I could have caught them on the long line. But the fact is they've wanted some bait, and I've basically emptied it in the sort of last hour and a half on this short line. So you are covering yourself a lot more by having the two lines. The other thing that's become apparent is the short hook length is so much better, like the 20 centimetre, and a big bunch of bloodworms. Like, the more bloodworm I put on, virtually, the quicker the bite. That's how sort of good it is. And like, I'm not feeding any worm now. The only thing I do wonder is, I have caught a smaller stamp, I'd say, but a lot of fish. Whether if I'd have fed worms, I might have had a few bigger fish. But that's one of them things to wonder for another day. You know, in blobbing it as well, much better, less indications and more bites. And I'm still on that 20 metre as well. Bear in mind, I put all my bait in at 19, but I fished 20. And like I said, I haven't had loads of liners to say, oh, there's a load of bream or skimmers sitting a metre back. So I think that's worked as well. I think maybe the only thing I'd have done different on this line is, knowing how good it's been, I'd have maybe put more in at the start, maybe put 10 in. I really don't think it would do any harm. And I think by pushing the line out on the match, if you remember, I fed it at 17 and fished at 18 and 17 on the bait. Didn't catch. I think pushing it out to 20 has worked as well. And I'd even consider pushing it out to sort of 22, 23 in a match situation. So it's been good so far. I'm hoping maybe a couple of popper bream will turn up late on, but we'll see. Well, since I last updated, it's pretty much been relentless. It's really nice, simple fishing as well. Literally all I'm doing, blobber joker, squeezing it into the middle of the feeder, 8 to 10 bloodworm on the hook, chuck it out, and I reckon within a minute and a half, 2 minutes, every single cast, there's a skimmer between like £1 and £2 on. I'd say I've had, don't know, at least 25, maybe more fish off the short line now. I must have over £40 easily. I mean, there's several things that have been key, but it's like been, once I've worked it out, as in the short hook length, blobber joker, it's just dead easy fishing. And it's amazing, like, considering there's still ice here, how many bites I've had. And I honestly believe, had I been sort of restricted to like normal baits, I doubt I'd have had a third of what I caught. And the best of it is as well, I've probably not, well, I know I haven't used £5 worth of bait. So I've got plenty of joker left. All I should do when I get home with that, I should just leam it up, just put a sprinkling of leam on it to separate it, whack it in the freezer. I mean, frozen joker, it's brilliant for skimmers anyway, so I'm not wasting any at all. Still on the little 3-hole cage, because I'm fishing short, I've only got the one strap of lead on it now. 20 centimetre hook length, size 14 up, big bunch of bloodworm. Cast it out. The only thing I'll say is as well, normally I like to fish really slack, like was for skimmers with braid, and let them sort of pull themselves on. But today, definitely seems better to fish with a decent bend in the tip. The bites have been really, really, like, delicate is the best way to describe them. By fishing with more of a bend in, I can get a proper pull. Whereas normally with a slack tip, they'll just sort of pull themselves on. Today it's definitely been better because of the way they seem to be feeding, fish with a decent bend in, and almost let them hook themselves and they'll just pull the rod in. So that's been a little bit interesting, because it's different to how I normally fish. Like I said, normally really slack and just let them pull themselves on, but it's not worked today. If I fish like that, I've missed a couple of bites and not seen bites, whereas fishing with a proper bend, in they're proper bites, and if you leave it long enough, they'll even take the rod right along the rest, as a few have showed. We've been fishing for 4 hours, 40 minutes. Like I said, it's been an interesting session, and I feel like I've learnt a bit as well. And I'm in bloodworm and joker fishing. It's a little bit different to the norm, but what it has shown is just how effective it is in the cold. And like I say, blobbing definitely seems to have been the way to go. And this short line's been a complete revelation. So there we go, that's the last fish of the day. Another skimmer, I reckon they're like £4, £6. But like I say, I've only had that one big one, but still good weight building fish. I'll pop him in the net and we'll have a look at what we've got. So there you go, fantastic fishing on a bitter cold day, and proof, if you needed it, just how effective bloodworm and joker can be in the feeder. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next month.